8 o'clock, January 1, 1945. Cold air bites into exposed skin across dozens of airfields in western Germany, Belgium, and the Netherlands. Engines cough, then roar, breaking the stillness of New Year's morning. The smell of aviation fuel hangs heavy, mixing with frost and oil. Boots crunch on frozen concrete as ground crews pull chocks away. Propellers blur into silver discs. One by one, then in waves, German fighter aircraft surge forward, shaking the ground beneath them. In command bunkers and makeshift headquarters, senior Luftwaffe officers lean over maps, headphones pressed tight to their ears. Clocks tick loudly. Every second matters. Outside, nearly the entire remaining strength of Germany's Western fighter force is lifting into the sky at once. This is not a drill, this is everything they have left. By the winter of 1944, the Luftwaffe is already bleeding to death. Once the dominant air force of Europe, it has been ground down by years of attrition. Allied bombers roam German skies almost unopposed, destroying factories, oil refineries, rail yards, and cities. Fuel shortages keep aircraft on the ground. Pilot training has been cut to the bone. Veteran aces are gone, killed or captured, replaced by young men with barely enough hours to fly, let alone fight. German commanders know the truth, even if they rarely say it aloud. Air superiority has been lost. And without control of the air, Germany cannot win the war. Still, there is one last gamble. In December 1944, as German armies launch their desperate counteroffensive in the Ardennes, Luftwaffe leadership searches for a way to support it. Allied aircraft are devastating German ground forces by day, destroying columns before they can move. If the Luftwaffe could somehow cripple Allied air power, even briefly, it might give the ground offensive a chance to succeed. The idea is audacious and terrifying. A massive surprise attack against Allied airfields in Belgium and the Netherlands. Strike at dawn. Fly low to avoid radar. Destroy as many aircraft on the ground as possible before Allied fighters can respond. The operation is named Bodenplatte, base plate, a reference to smashing the enemy's foundation. Planning begins in secrecy. Extreme secrecy, only a small circle of commanders knows the full scope of the operation. Even German air defense units are left in the dark. Anti-aircraft batteries along the front are not informed that hundreds of friendly fighters will soon be flying low and fast through their sectors. The fear of leaks outweighs every other concern. It is a decision that will prove fatal. The force assembled for Bodenplatte is staggering given the Luftwaffe's condition. Roughly 900 fighters are committed, mostly Messerschmitt Bf 109s and Focke-Wulf Fw 190s, drawn from units across western Germany. Many of these squadrons are already under strength. Some pilots have never flown combat missions at low altitude. Others are unfamiliar with the terrain they are expected to navigate in near-total radio silence. Maps are outdated. Weather forecasts are uncertain. Fuel margins are razor-thin, and yet, the orders stand. Pilots are briefed on New Year's Eve. They are told the mission is vital to the war effort. That surprise is essential. That radio silence must be maintained at almost all costs. Some are warned not to fire recognition flares, even if fired upon by friendly units, to avoid revealing the operation. A few sense the danger immediately. Low-level flight across unfamiliar territory in winter weather leaves no room for error. A single navigational mistake could send an aircraft directly over an Allied base, or worse, into the sights of German flak crews who have no idea what is coming. But there is no space for hesitation. Orders are orders. As dawn breaks on January 1, 1945, aircraft climb just high enough to clear trees and rooftops, then drop back down into the mist. They follow rivers, roads, and railway lines, engines throttled carefully to conserve fuel. Frost forms on canopies. Visibility is uneven. In some areas, cloud cover presses dangerously low. Inside the cockpits, tension is suffocating. Pilots grip their controls, scanning the ground, counting seconds, trying to reconcile what they see with what their maps promise should be there. One wrong turn could mean disaster. Meanwhile, on the other side of the front, Allied airfields are waking slowly. The war has not stopped for New Year's Day, but the front feels distant. Some pilots sleep late. Ground crews prepare routine maintenance. Aircraft sit lined up wingtip to wingtip, exposed on open aprons, making tempting targets. Few expect a major German air operation. Fewer still imagine hundreds of fighters racing toward them at treetop height. Back in German command centers, anticipation builds. The clocks approach the planned attack window. Radios crackle occasionally, but most units maintain silence as ordered. Commanders imagine flames rising from Allied airfields, rows of destroyed aircraft, a sudden shift in the balance of power. For a brief moment, it seems possible. Then the first troubling reports arrive. Scattered messages mention flak, heavy flak, unexpected flak. Some formations are already taking losses before reaching their targets. Others report confusion, aircraft missing, leaders shot down. The information is incomplete, but the tone is unmistakable. Something is going wrong. The Luftwaffe's strength once lay in coordination, tight formations, clear communication, disciplined execution. But by 1945, those strengths are eroded. Fuel shortages have reduced training. Many pilots lack experience flying in large formations. Radio discipline, meant to preserve secrecy, now prevents coordination. When things begin to unravel, and unravel they do, some formations drift off course and attack the wrong airfields. Others arrive late or early, losing the advantage of surprise. A few never arrive at all. German commanders listen, helpless, as fragments of the operation play out across hundreds of kilometers of sky. They cannot see what is happening, only hear echoes of it through broken transmissions and delayed reports. Outside, the winter sun climbs higher. Smoke begins to rise on the horizon, some of it from Allied airfields, some of it from German aircraft burning in friendly territory. By the time the first surviving fighters begin to return, landing damaged and low on fuel, it is already clear that this morning will not unfold as planned. Losses are mounting. The silence from entire units is impossible to ignore, and somewhere between hope and dread, a realization starts to form in the minds of Germany's air commanders. This operation, meant to save the Luftwaffe, may instead be destroying what little remains of it. The attacks hit almost all at once. Across Belgium, the Netherlands, and northeastern France, German fighters burst out of the low cloud and mist, engines screaming just above the ground. At airfields like Eindhoven, Brussels Melsbroek, St. Trond, Metz Freskedy, and Asch, the first warning is the sound, deep, sudden, unmistakable. Then gunfire. Tracers rip across snow-covered runways. Aircraft erupt in flames where they sit. For a few critical minutes, the gamble appears to work. At several airfields, Allied planes are caught completely exposed. Fighters and bombers burn wingtip to wingtip. Fuel trucks explode, sending black smoke rolling into the winter sky. Hangars are strafed. Control towers are raked with cannon fire. German pilots fly straight down runways, firing at anything that moves, convinced they are witnessing the collapse of Allied air power. But the illusion does not last. At Asch airfield, American pilots are already preparing to fly. When German fighters appear, Mustangs scramble under fire, lifting off through smoke and debris. Within minutes, experienced Allied pilots are climbing hard into the attack. The sky fills with twisting contrails and flashing gunfire. German pilots who expected defenseless targets now face veteran opponents in full daylight. Elsewhere, Allied anti-aircraft crews react with lethal speed. Light flak and heavy machine guns hammer the low-flying attackers. The Luftwaffe's chosen tactic, flying at treetop level to avoid radar, leaves no margin for escape. There is no altitude to dive from. No room to turn. Aircraft are hit and crash in seconds. Then, as formations turn for home, the worst danger emerges. German flak batteries open fire. The secrecy surrounding Operation Bodenplatte has been absolute. Most German air defense units have not been informed of the mission. They have been warned for months that Allied fighters frequently conduct low-level attacks. When they see aircraft approaching fast and low from the west, they do exactly what they have been trained to do. They fire. Shells burst among returning German formations. Fighters disintegrate midair. Pilots bail out too low for parachutes to open. Others try to nurse damaged aircraft across the lines, only to be hit again by their own guns. In some areas, flak fire is so intense that surviving pilots later describe it as worse than anything they encountered over Allied airfields. Confusion spreads through the Luftwaffe like a shockwave. Radio discipline collapses as pilots break silence to warn others. Formations scatter. Some aircraft turn back prematurely, low on fuel and badly damaged. Others press on blindly, unsure of where they are or what awaits them. Navigation errors multiply. Poor weather and low altitude make landmarks hard to identify. Some pilots mistake towns or roads and attack the wrong targets. Others miss their airfields entirely on the return flight and crash after running out of fuel. By late morning, the scale of the disaster becomes clearer. Reports arrive at command centers in fragments. Units checking in at half strength. Squadron leaders killed. Entire groups missing. For commanders listening in bunker-like rooms, the numbers are almost impossible to believe. Roughly 900 fighters took part in the operation. By the end of the day, around 300 aircraft are destroyed or damaged beyond repair. More devastating still, more than 200 pilots are killed, wounded, or captured. Among them are experienced leaders, group commanders, squadron leaders, instructors, men whose loss cannot be replaced. This is the true catastrophe. The Luftwaffe can still build aircraft, at least on paper. What it cannot rebuild is experience. Pilot training has already been reduced to a fraction of what it once was. Many new pilots are entering combat with fewer than 100 flight hours. The men lost on January 1, 1945 represent the last core of professional skill the Luftwaffe possesses. Allied losses, by comparison, are serious but manageable. Hundreds of Allied aircraft are damaged or destroyed on the ground, particularly at a handful of airfields. But most Allied pilots survive. Many aircraft are repaired within days. Replacement planes and crews arrive steadily from Britain and the United States. Within a week, Allied air operations resume at full intensity. The strategic balance does not shift. German commanders now face the truth they had hoped to avoid. Operation Bodenplatte has failed to achieve its primary objective. Allied air superiority remains intact. Worse, the Luftwaffe has crippled itself in the process. In post-war accounts, surviving German officers described the moment the loss figures were finalized. There is no shouting. No dramatic outbursts. Just silence. The kind of silence that comes when everyone understands the same thing at once. The gamble is lost. For the pilots who survive, the emotional toll is immense. Some land believing they have achieved a decisive victory, only to learn hours later that half their comrades are gone. Others carry the memory of friendly flak bursts exploding around them, the knowledge that secrecy and desperation killed more men than the enemy did. The planning failures become obvious in hindsight. Poor coordination. Inadequate navigation training. A fatal lack of communication with air defense units. Yet none of these errors occur in a vacuum. They are the product of a force pushed beyond its limits. By January 1945, Germany is losing on every front. Fuel shortages cripple mobility. Allied bombing devastates infrastructure. The Ardennes offensive is already stalling. Operation Bodenplatte is not born of arrogance, it is born of desperation, and desperation, in war, rarely forgives mistakes. As winter tightens its grip and the front lines begin to move inexorably eastward, the absence of the Luftwaffe is felt everywhere. German ground units are left exposed by day. Supply convoys are destroyed from the air. Retreat becomes chaos under constant attack. The loss of those fighters is not just a tactical setback. It accelerates the collapse of Germany's ability to fight in the West, and as German commanders look at the shattered remains of their air force, a darker question looms, one they can no longer avoid. If this was the last great effort of the Luftwaffe, what happens now that the skies belong entirely to the enemy? By nightfall on January 1, 1945, the snow around German airfields is scarred with blackened craters and broken metal. Mechanics and ground crews work in near silence, dragging damaged aircraft into hangars, counting empty dispersal pads, staring at places where familiar machines should be. The air still smells of burned fuel and hot oil, carried by the cold wind. Inside command buildings, the final reports are coming in. There will be no corrections. No revisions. Operation Bodenplatte is finished. For Luftwaffe commanders, the numbers are devastating. Hundreds of aircraft destroyed or damaged beyond repair. More than 200 pilots killed, wounded, or captured in a single morning. Entire fighter groups reduced to shadows of their former strength. The loss is not just material, it is generational. The men who knew how to fight, who knew how to lead in the air, are gone, and the war does not pause to absorb the shock. Within days, Allied aircraft return in overwhelming numbers. Fighter bombers sweep roads and rail lines, hunting German convoys in daylight with near impunity. Bridges are destroyed. Supply depots burn. German ground units move only at night, exhausted and exposed, hiding by day from an enemy they can no longer challenge in the sky. The Luftwaffe is still present on paper, but in practice, it no longer controls the air. Surviving German pilots feel the change immediately. Missions become shorter, rarer, and far more dangerous. Fuel shortages worsen. Aircraft are grounded for lack of spare parts. New pilots arrive at frontline units with minimal training, thrown into combat they cannot possibly survive. Losses continue, but now without any strategic purpose. For many commanders, Bodenplatte becomes a silent burden. Some will survive the war and later describe the operation as the moment they knew the air war in the West was over. Others never speak of it publicly. The responsibility is too heavy. Hundreds of young men took off believing they were part of a decisive blow. Most never returned. The secrecy that once promised surprise had instead created chaos. German flak crews, doing exactly what they were trained to do, shot down their own aircraft. Navigation errors compounded by winter weather and low-altitude scattered formations. Radio silence prevented coordination when it was needed most. None of this was inevitable. But all of it was possible in a force stretched beyond its limits. Allied commanders, meanwhile, draw very different conclusions. Operation Bodenplatte is studied not as a near disaster, but as a warning. Airfields are dispersed more widely. Anti-aircraft defenses are strengthened. Alert procedures are tightened. The Allies adapt and move on. Within weeks, the skies over Western Europe are effectively uncontested. Allied bombers fly deeper into Germany. Fighters roam freely, striking targets at will. The Luftwaffe's absence accelerates the collapse of German defenses on the ground, shortening the war in the West. For historians, Bodenplatte stands as one of the clearest examples of how air power can be lost not in a single dramatic battle, but through accumulated exhaustion and one final, desperate gamble. The technology was still formidable. The aircraft were fast, well-armed, and dangerous. What was missing were the people, the fuel, the training, and the time. Innovation alone could not compensate for a system that was already broken. Today, the airfields struck during Operation Bodenplatte are quiet places. Runways have been rebuilt, abandoned, or repurposed. Grass grows where fighters once burned. In some locations, fragments of wreckage still surface after heavy rain, small reminders of a morning when the sky filled with fire and confusion. The story of those 180 minutes is not just about defeat. It is about limits. The limit of secrecy. The limit of courage under impossible conditions. The limit of what technology can achieve when human experience is exhausted. Modern air forces still study Bodenplatte. Not for its boldness, but for its lessons. Communication matters. Coordination matters. And above all, people matter more than machines, because machines can be replaced. Pilots cannot. As the Second World War ends just months later, the silence over Western Germany is striking. No great aerial battles. No last stand in the skies. Just Allied aircraft moving freely, unchallenged, shaping the final battles on the ground below. And when we look back at that frozen New Year's morning in 1945, one question lingers, heavy and unresolved. How often in war does a single desperate decision erase years of hard-won capability in a matter of hours? If this story made you pause, if it changed how you think about air power, leadership, or sacrifice, that reflection continues long after the engines fall silent.